So welcome, Chris. I'm really happy that we are finally able to do this interview and I can hear how you're using Cadenza in your studio. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I play assistant principal flute and piccolo in the VSO. Um, I grew up in Toronto. I went through the whole Royal Conservatory system, and then after that I went to school in New York. And before I came here, I was in the Memphis Symphony for 5 years down in Tennessee. So I'm happy to be back in Canada, and I've now been here for about 4 years, and I'm starting to uh, build up a little bit of a studio here in Vancouver.
That's great. And I'm sure you're enjoying the weather in Vancouver as well.
Yes,
That's great. So, how long have you been using Cadenza in your studio?
about a year now.
Great. So, where did you hear of it? How did you come across Cadenza?
Well, the so I teach at the Vancouver Symphony School of Music, which is sort of a community school that we have attached to the symphony, um, and it's run by Angela Elster. She's our president and CEO of both institutions. And I think that you would know better than I would, but I think that she was involved early on in the development of the music tool suite when she was at the conservatory in Toronto.
That's right. She's been involved from several different facets, actually. She's also involved through the Coalition for Music Education. Actually,
Mm.
she is one of the members of our steering committee who helps us make decisions and take Cadenza in a great direction to serve teachers and students.
Yeah, I remember her bringing it up at a department heads meeting. Um, and the reason that I kind of jumped on it was that at the time I had a really, really keen student who I was really fond of, but she could only afford to take one lesson a month. And Cadenza sounded like a really interesting opportunity for me to give her more support without charging her for more lessons than she could afford.
Can you describe that a little? How you used Cadenza with that student?
Yeah, well, mostly it was just so that I could check in with her in writing. She would write little reflections on what was going on and how she had done with her scales and her studies that week, and then I would assign her a new one. So it was mostly just um, a way for me to keep updating her sort of lesson plans, her practice goals and things like that without actually having to see her. Um, Later on, we got into when she was preparing for performances and things, we got into sending recordings and comments back and forth. Um, but at the beginning, it was just sort of a running practice journal goal setting thing.
That's great. That's really great. And I'm sure that she was able to notice her own progress by using it that way as well.
Yeah, she was probably my most detailed note taker. It really varies. The level of engagement varies from student to student, but she really um, was quite analytical with her reports back to me about what went well and what didn't go well and what she was hoping to do tomorrow that was better. So that was always really encouraging.
That sounds great. Sounds like the student really took a hold of it and used it well. Um, so, what age group in general do you use Cadenza with?
All my students have been in high school in
Okay.
Vancouver.
So, they're roughly from ages 14 to 18.
Hmm.
And did they find the tool intuitive? Did they find it difficult to use, or did they jump right in and just figured it out?
Well, I never heard any complaints, and they seem to have figured it out. We were using it, you know, uh, without too many hitches. There were a couple times that I had to describe where to find things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the media annotator is like a whole extra hidden. thing where once you've found it, you've got all these great resources, but a couple of my students had to be directed there to find
Interesting.
it.
Did they upload the videos as attachments instead of the media annotator? Is
Yeah,
that what you
I've
were
had
finding?
people do both. Yeah.
We've found that as well. Yeah. So that's interesting to note. I'll take note of that. That we may be able to bring students there in a more intuitive way. Yeah,
Mm.
that's a great observation. And what feature of Cadenza do you find most useful with your students, and why?
Well, I mean, the great thing for me is that I don't have to, I can just take my notes during the lesson and then it's there. I don't have to take any extra time to, either. When I was a kid, we would write in a book and pass the book back and forth. Um, I guess paper is a little passe now, but at the start, um, it was just really nice not to have to, send an email or yeah, Google Doc or whatever. It was nice to be able to just put my notes up somewhere and then the kids could access it from the other side. Um, but the other thing was the just the ease with which you can upload video and both, look at it from both sides. That has been a lifesaver during the pandemic when um, I really haven't been able to I haven't been able to hear my students live to speak of. And especially at the beginning, sound quality over Zoom was pretty terrible. Um, I had one student in particular who just sounded like, if you can imagine putting your head underwater and then someone runs a chainsaw nearby, that was what his flute playing sounded like. And so I remember the first couple Zoom lessons just sitting there and thinking, I mean, I can guess that you use more air. You can. I think you should probably play that again slower. Have you used a metronome? You're just sort of guessing using your they're educated guesses based on the person's past. But anyway, so ability to upload good quality video and have me be able to watch it either during the lesson or before the lesson was really a lifesaver because it was the only way to hear what they actually sounded like.
That's great, and I appreciate the humor. As far as the piano goes, when the students use the pedal in the Zoom quality with the addition of the pedal, basically you described it perfectly. A chainsaw underwater. Yes, that's it.
Yeah,
I'm
well,
sure.
and then I mean we all have the same issues of, there will be a lag and there's a note that's 12 times too long and then they run up the scale. There was one student whose latency was so bad that she would finish the scale like her flute was already down and it was still playing. Like there was no connection between the picture and the audio.
Yes, I'm sure so many teachers are going to relate to that when they listen to this, for sure. Yes, the uploading of the videos in the media annotator has been a lifesaver to the ears and to the
Yes.
feedback. Yes. Um, would you say that Cadenza has changed the way you teach in any way?
Yeah, well, I think the focus on recording and playback and excuse me, I mean, I always used to tell my students I always used to tell myself to record myself. And it just didn't really happen. It's this really, really useful um, self-teaching technique and teaching technique that just didn't, it's kind of unpleasant to listen to yourself and it's an extra device to take out and you have to upload things. And I would always avoid it in myself, and my students for sure would always avoid it. And so now the fact that, first of all, it's quite easy and intuitive on Cadenza, but also that it's the only way, it's just the way that we're all operating now. um, it's been kind of a blessing because, um, for all the reasons that we told them to record themselves all along, they can hear the mistakes right away. They can fix them without my having to say anything. Um, it, I am sorry that it took a global pandemic for my students to start recording themselves, and for me to start recording. There was the summer when we weren't doing any work um, at the Symphony. I was recording an etude every day just on my phone and using it, and it's such a learning experience. Um, and it just seems to be sort of the way of the world now. So
That's great.
that's been a big change.
Yeah. Well, that's great to hear from the development side because that was one of the reasons that it was developed. So that's fabulous. Thank you. Have you noticed progress in your students in any way that you hadn't observed before? So maybe accelerated progress, or are your students progressing about the same? Is there any change that you would say overall in your students since they started using it?
Um, it's hard to say because my students are better now than they were a year ago. Thank goodness. But
Right.
some of that is just time. Um, I think that the analytical component, being able to see your goals in paper, track your progress. Um, Paper obviously here is a metaphor, but having something written that you can compare week to week, and then also, like I say, the video component, being able to hear what you're doing. I think that has really helped people develop their critical faculties.
Hmm.
Um, so yes, I'm sure there has been an improvement that way.
Great. That's fabulous. Um, and finally, my final question is there anything that the Cadenza team could do to support you more as a teacher through our own efforts?
Hmm. Um, no, I mean, no, I've found the Cadenza team extremely friendly and responsive. We've talked a little bit before about email notifications. I know that um, if you have a huge studio, it sounds like a crazy prospect to have an email notification anytime something happens on Cadenza. I have quite a small studio because I'm full time at the Symphony. It's just sort of an extra thing for me, and I'm not on the Cadenza homepage or dashboard or whatever it is on a regular enough basis to just notice when things get uploaded. So there is an extra step of students emailing me to say I uploaded something, and then once I'm on the website, there are the notifications. But uh, I don't know. It might be nice to be notified by email, although of course, like I say, I understand the other side. If
Right.
I had 40 students, that would be very annoying.
I do have 40 students, and yes, it would be. Yeah. So that's well noted, though. We'll take note of it, and it would be maybe something that could be optional, so you could opt into
Mm,
email notifications or opt out. Yeah, we're always keeping a running list of suggestions that come in from teachers, and Cadenza is what it is today because of those notifications from teachers letting us know what they would like to see in there. So we're always looking to add features that help. Well, that's great. Thank you so much for your time, Chris.
my
This has been
pleasure.
great. And I think it's wonderful to know that Cadenza can be used by several different age groups. It was originally designed for students between the ages of 8 and 14, and it's proven to be actually ageless. It works for
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah. Well, and maybe I'll just add that particularly when my students get more advanced and they're starting to apply for, universities or high level summer programs and they're working on orchestral excerpts, that has been a really great because they're so specific. These excerpts are so short, like often they're 20, 30, 45 seconds long. And, every note has to be a certain way. And so that is the kind of thing where recording yourself becomes really um, kind of crucial. I mean, we used to do it without, and it was hard, and now it's a little bit easier because they're having to record themselves. So for sure, I think it's got huge application for the more advanced crowd.
That's great to hear. Yeah, that's super. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll end the recording there. It's greatly appreciated.